It's Emilia here from Higher Standards Caregiver Training. I'm an occupational therapist, and I am here today with the wonderful, fabulous Ashley Smith from AmeriCare Fort Worth. And we're going to talk today about the AmeriCare, incredibly unique, incredibly valuable home of the Stroke Strong program. I really wanted to do this and highlight it for folks because there is a huge need for high quality care for stroke survivors, and AmeriCare in Fort Worth, Ashley and the rest of the leadership team there and their caregivers are really doing something special with this. So tell me, just what made you interested in really working with stroke survivors in the first place?
That's a great question. So growing up, my mom was a young stroke survivor. She had her first stroke when she was 25 and continued to have strokes thereafter. So her first stroke at 25 was her most debilitating stroke. Back in the early 90s, women that age, men that age, nobody was having strokes that young. So the time aspect that's so important when you are having a stroke was kind of pushed aside because they didn't really think that's what was going on. So that was definitely her most debilitating stroke. She had to relearn how to talk, how to walk, how to use her other hand to write because her she had whole left side paralysis. So we really have experienced firsthand kind of how a stroke can affect you as a whole. It's very different from, maybe having a heart condition or, having falling and breaking your hip where something's very isolated.
Mm-hmm.
It really affects your entire cognition, mobility, speech, how you understand language, how you use that language, and kind of
your brain is the control center, right? It literally controls every single function. So everything can potentially be affected. Yeah.
And so we've been able to see her age with these effects. We've been able to see kind of the rehab she was able to make, but then kind of see how age and time really continues to cause issues with that muscle spasticity, with the issues that she had with her paralysis on the left side. So definitely just wanted to bring a different light to stroke survivors who experience that. And it's just an all-encompassing thing that happens.
Yeah. And I think that, that highlights a really important point about caring for stroke survivors is that regardless of what is going on with anyone, you really do need the proper knowledge to properly care for someone. And of course, we're not talking about rehabilitation here. We're not talking about providing medical care, but you don't have to be providing those services to still need to know what you're doing when you are with someone who has had any sort of illness or injury. And stroke is one of those extremely unique things. It's a unique event that can happen to someone that, as you pointed out so well, really can affect every and any aspect of their life. So you have to have caregivers that understand the different ways that stroke can present in terms of maybe it's not just paralysis on one side or spasticity, but also understanding, there could be a speech component involved here. How do we communicate more effectively with this client, understanding that can be an issue? So it really requires a different level of training and knowledge and experience to provide that care safely and effectively. But, with that understanding, what do y'all do for your caregivers to make sure that they have that better training and knowledge?
So one of the things before we match a caregiver with a client that's had a stroke is we want to ensure that that caregiver has personal experience attached to that with someone who's had a stroke. There's a different level of kind of emotional things that go into caring for someone who has a stroke, because they may look okay, but aphasia is huge for people who have had a stroke. Wait time is huge for people who are trying to communicate when they've had that kind of brain damage that a stroke can, that event can cause. So really ensuring that the caregiver that we're going to put with that person has experience with someone who has had a stroke. The other thing that we're going to do is we ensure that caregiver has a phone call from one of our staff that really goes over, how did that stroke affect that person? Is it right side weakness? Is it left side weakness? Is it just their arm? Is it their arm and their leg? Is it their speech? So that they're kind of prepared in how they're going to help assist that person. If they're left side weak, they've got to address that side first. You know what I mean? So just ensuring that they have all of those tips and tricks to make it the most comfortable for that person who's had that stroke.
Mm-hmm. So really just going beyond, it's not like you're just telling your caregivers, oh, this person is a stroke survivor.
Mm-hmm.
It's also telling them, okay, this person is a stroke survivor, but here are the specific things that you need to know and understand about
Mm-hmm.
this person. Again, going back to just that knowledge that it can affect so many different things and areas. And of course, it can leave other areas of the body and function and cognition totally untouched. So really making sure that your caregivers who are working with that stroke survivor know, for this person, these are the things that I need to be extra aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that y'all have also done to kind of like really go the extra mile to ensure that your caregivers have the best training possible, really truly, that can be provided for any condition, but very much, when we first met, we were talking about stroke and making sure that they had everything that they would need to care properly for stroke survivors, is y'all have partnered with us at Higher Standards Caregiver Training to make sure that every single one of your caregivers, as part of their onboarding, as part of their entry training, every single one of them goes through a series of courses that teach them very specifically how to work with stroke survivors, and going beyond even hands-on skills, help them to understand what different aspects of someone's life and function and body and cognition can be affected by stroke, why they're affected by that stroke, and so why the strategies we want them to use are so important to use. That is so important, that portion of it, doing the educational piece of the why and not just the how, really changes the level of care that those folks can provide. Because when we arm them with that knowledge, when we tell them why and not just how,
Mm-hmm.
then your caregivers can make universally better choices, right? They can, if they understand these baseline concepts of why this is occurring, not only will they use those strategies that they need to use more often, but they'll be able to apply them more broadly. And y'all have made sure that at just even a basic baseline, all of your caregivers are going through this level of training.
Yes. I think it's huge to have this, especially with all the different pieces that you offer the team. Especially with the the biweekly Zooms that they get to be a part of, where they can actually bring questions or situations to the forefront for the entire team to not only just become aware of, but also to learn from, and get to add their 2 cents into the situation for how to best care for someone like that. Stroke is so interesting because no other medical event like that, do you have people who really need to practice how they did things before their strokes. So
Mm-hmm.
ordering food. going to the grocery store, getting in and out of a car, driving a car. Those are all things that we kind of don't think about, that we kind of take for granted, that someone who has a stroke really has to build the confidence to relearn and try again. And so having caregivers that can help them start building that confidence and that motivation that it takes to start trying those tasks again is huge. And that's really, I mean, that's a big part of being able to help support a stroke survivor.
And also allowing them to have the assistance there if necessary, to make sure that as they're trying to do some of these things again more independently, they can do it safely, right? Like in the rehab world. So as I said, I'm an occupational therapist. I've done an extensive amount of stroke rehabilitation myself. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to create this kind of programming for folks like y'all. I'm actually, I don't know if we've discussed this before. I'm actually a published author in topics in stroke rehabilitation. So it's a huge passion of mine. But in the rehab world, you know, one of the most important things about stroke recovery is that you get back into doing those functional tasks, and you have to do them repetitively. So, you know, having that extra support there to make sure that people can try to do the things that they have been instructed to do, you know, or that they want or need to do, and that they have someone there for safety while they're doing it, is absolutely huge. Because so often, if people don't have that level of support available to them, then they might be unable to attempt to engage in those activities,
right,
just for safety reasons, or they might just be too afraid to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even if someone has told them it's safe for you to try and do this, there can be a lot of fear after something like that has occurred, which is totally understandable. Any of us might very well have that same reaction after we'd had a stroke. So just giving stroke survivors the confidence to re-engage and participate, so that they can kind of return to the highest possible quality of life, is absolutely such a huge benefit to, you know, having someone like y'all around.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are so many home care, private duty choices out there for folks. What do you think really distinguishes AmeriCare Fort Worth from the other providers out there when you're talking about providing care for stroke survivors?
So I think one of the things that really sets us apart is just the family experience that we've had with actually, you know, dealing with the event of a stroke, kind of at different points, especially through my life, and definitely, you know, my mom and dad's, experiencing that and kind of seeing what that rehabilitation looks like for that person, not just from a standpoint of that person, but also just from the family unit, who it affects, how it affects them, just having that just personal knowledge of how it can impact someone, and how it can impact so many different parts of that person's existence and abilities to do what they normally did. I think that our care plan customization is incredibly specific to the needs of the clients that we serve. It is, although we're non-medical, you know, we're going to get all of the medical history information from that person, not only just to create the care plan, but so that we can effectively communicate that care plan to the entire team that's going to see that person, whether it's one caregiver that they have consistently, or whether it's a couple people that are going to see them, whether it's someone that saw them or someone who is going to be new filling in that shift for them. They're going to get a conversation with one of our care coordinators that really goes through what did the stroke of that impact look like for that client. You know, where are they weak? What are they struggling with? How are you going to best support them when you go into their home? The third thing that I really think impacts the care that we're able to provide is the higher standards caregiver trainings that our staff receives with Emilia. beyond just the basic onboarding trainings that they're provided that give them a little bit of that knowledge into how to support a stroke survivor, the continuing education that they're provided with the live trainings that we do bi-weekly allows for the continuation of questions and scenarios where other team members can also hear. I think really helps kind of support the understanding beyond the basics of how we can help support the clients that we have who are recovering from a stroke.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you anymore, because of course, as you know, there's a lot that we can put in on-demand trainings, but the fact is that in real life, things don't always look exactly the way we expect them to, or, things happen. So it is so important. And I really applaud how, how sort of far-seeing y'all have been in understanding that your caregivers do need, in order to support their clients, and especially the stroke survivors that they're serving, they do need ongoing access to training, to experts, so that when situations come up that they're not familiar with, or maybe the training they got at onboarding didn't address, there's someone that they can go to that they reliably know can give them the information that they need, who has the highest possible level of training and certification themselves,
right,
in order to make sure that the knowledge that your caregivers are getting, they're not doing Google searches here.
Right.
We're not relying on Dr. Google. We're really talking to someone who can give solid advice on what to do in different situations that will keep both your clients and of course your caregivers safe as well. I'm going to say that one of the things that also really helps y'all stand out is the fact that you are committed to these ongoing bi-weekly trainings that happen live, that happen with actual experts, because that is honestly unheard of in this industry. It's the reason that I started Higher Standards Caregiver Training in the first place, is getting that kind of ongoing education rather than, giving a one-time training or even a once-a-year training. There's just no comparison to what y'all are providing in terms of education versus what other folks are likely providing. So I certainly applaud how far thinking you are in that, and also applaud the commitment that you guys truly have to your clients and your caregivers to go that extra mile and do that. It certainly is something that sets you all apart.
Thank you.
Okay, so would you tell me about the Stroke Strong program?
Yeah, so the Stroke Strong program really goes through kind of the top 9 areas that we feel like are most impacted by a stroke. So we want to ensure that our stroke program, when we're meeting with a client who has had a stroke, that we're looking at them as a whole, that we're looking at all of the parts that a stroke could have affected. So that is with speech. Part of our program goes through, what is aphasia? What does that look like? How do you know if the person that you're working with is suffering from aphasia? And how can you best support those kind of speech needs? It also goes through mobility, which is another huge issue for stroke survivors. It goes through building a routine with that person around kind of their new abilities and helping them gain independence with that, so that they can get that motivation to want to try the activities and things that they did prior to the stroke. It also includes medication reminders, bathing and grooming assistance. So all of kind of the basic needs, but also with more of the cognitive supports that we want to build in there with them, games, activities, things that they like to do prior to the stroke that we can kind of help support them in learning how to redo post-stroke.
That is honestly and truly what an incredible, comprehensive, thoughtful program. It really is one of a kind out there, and I'm so excited to kind of help you share this program with the world that you've got at AmeriCare Fort Worth.